Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something pretty fascinating, actually.
We are. It's this study in how an organization survives, how it keeps its integrity.
Specifically, Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, here's this global fellowship, right? All over the world, different cultures.
And yet it's held together, stayed true to its core for almost a century now.
With basically no central boss, no one forcing compliance.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing when you stop and think about it.
It really is. What jumps out when you look at the history of the source material is just how paradoxical it is.
Yeah.
Well, Bill Wilson, one of the co-founders, he put it perfectly. He said AA had liberty verging on license.
Reverging on license.
Yeah.
That sounds like chaos.
Exactly. You've got this worldwide group made up of people who, let's be honest, often didn't respond well to authority when they were drinking.
Right. Anarchists, almost.
But somehow, this same group has what he called an irresistible strength of purpose and action.
So how does it work? How does, like you said, a crowd of anarchists function at all? Because looking at it from a normal organizational perspective, well, it shouldn't. They don't have the usual structures. They don't take outside money in the same way. There's no professional hierarchy.
It defies conventional wisdom. And that tension, that's what we're diving into today. We're going deep into the sources to figure out the secret sauce. You know, how does AA maintain its integrity? How does it survive? Where's the actual lifeblood?
Okay, so what are the sources telling us?
Yeah.
Where does that integrity really come from?
Well, when you dig into the history, the philosophy, the answer that keeps coming up is, it's surprisingly simple, but very hard to pull off on a global scale.
Okay.
The real core, the integrity, it's not really in the big meetings or even the famous books necessarily.
No.
It's in the smallest unit, the most maybe fragile part, that confidential one-to-one connection, what they call sponsorship.
Ah, sponsorship. So the survival mechanism isn't top-down at all.
Not at all. It's completely decentralized. It flows through that direct personal link between one alcoholic helping another. It's like a transmission system.
Yeah. A human transmission system.
Exactly. And this peer-to-peer way of doing things, it inherently protects the core message, that raw experience of recovery, from all the stuff that usually corrupts movements. You know, the drive for power, for prestige, for big money.
Things that have sunk plenty of other well-intentioned groups throughout history.
Absolutely. So AA built this decentralized miracle, almost, based on one fundamental need. You have to carry the message to another alcoholic if you want to stay sober yourself. Survival depends on giving it away.
The sources are really clear on that the whole thing depends on this transmission.
Explicitly. If that person-to-person sharing stops, the sources suggest the whole fellowship could, well, wither and die. You have to keep giving the message away to keep it alive, both for the individual and the group.
Wow. Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Let's unpack where this message even came from and why sharing it became so fundamental right from day one.
Okay, so the starting point everyone pretty much agrees on is June 10th, 1935.
Right, Dr. Bob's sobriety date.
That's the one. Dr. Bob Smith's last drink. He'd been working with Bill Wilson. They'd been sort of testing out this idea, this radical idea at the time, that maybe only an alcoholic could truly reach another alcoholic.
And it wasn't just a nice idea like, oh, let's go help someone. The sources show it was more urgent than that, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. It was almost existential. As soon as Dr. Bud got sober, the very next thought for both him and Bill was, okay, who's next? We need to find another drunk to fix. That was the language they used back then. Very much trial and error.
Finding someone to fix, that impulse, that immediate need to pass it on became the engine for the whole thing.
It really did. And Bill Wilson, he spent about 4 months there in Akron working with Dr. Bob and a few others. When he was leaving, that's when he had this huge realization.
What was that?
He realized he wasn't just staying sober in spite of working with these other guys. He was staying sober and actually joyously sober because he was working with them.
Ah, so it wasn't a burden, it was the solution.
Precisely. His own sobriety wasn't just something to protect. It was something that grew stronger, something he could actually share by carrying the message. It wasn't just about willpower anymore.
That changes everything, doesn't it? Recovery becomes less of an internal battle and more of a relational act, something you do with others.
Exactly. And the critical thing about how they did it, especially in those early days, it was profoundly non-coercive. They figured out pretty quick that lecturing, instructing, playing doctor, none of that worked.
Right, so what do they do instead?
Well, the story of Bob E., he became AA number 12, is a perfect example. When the early guys went to visit him, the sources are really specific about this.
Yeah.
They only talked about their own experiences. That's it. They shared what it was like being drunk, the misery, the hopelessness, and then they shared what it was like now being sober, the
But
contrast.
no list of rules, no, here's what you need to do.
None. They just offered identification. They held up a mirror to his own pain. They talked about those internal things, the wreckage inside, concepts he instantly got, like resentment freezing you up or self-pity eating away at you.
As he recognized in himself.
Absolutely. But they never once told him what to do about it or how to find a spiritual path. They just laid out their own stories, flaws and all, and the relief they were experiencing.
And what was his reaction?
Bobby said later he just listened. He heard their stories, and by the third day, he felt different, refreshed. But he admitted he had no idea why or how it worked. It was purely about that connection, the shared story. That was the pathway out of the absolute isolation he was in.
And that focus on connection, it ties right into how we often understand addiction now, doesn't it? Based on the sources.
It does. Addiction is so often seen today, and you see hints of this understanding even in the early writings as fundamentally a problem of disconnection.
The disease of isolation.
That's a great way to put it. The ultimate disease of isolation. The sources talk about this, whether it's driven by crushing loneliness or trying to run from some kind of, existential void.
Or even just that feeling, maybe for intellectuals, of not being able to square your ideas with the messy reality of life, especially at last call, as one source puts it.
Right. Whatever the specific reason, the core issue is pulling away from real connection. Feeling, as one text says, profoundly depeopleized.
Depeopleized. Wow. That feeling of hiding yourself away.
Yeah, maybe you literally hide, or maybe you use booze to just blast through all the pretense in this sort of chaotic, uncontrolled way. But either way, the sober self stays hidden.
So if the root problem is that deep isolation.
Then the solution has to be the opposite, right? It has to be genuine connection.
Makes sense?
Yeah. The fix isn't just self-help in a vacuum, it's about healing in relationship. One source really emphasizes this. Often, the first glimmer of hope, that first sense of spirituality or just relief, comes in relationship with another person or with our recovery group.
That vulnerability, sharing your stuff with one other person, that directly fights the loneliness and the self-centeredness that just defines active addiction.
Exactly. So that one-on-one sharing, the thing that started the whole fellowship, it wasn't just a clever strategy for growing the group. It was, and still is, the direct antidote to the core symptom of the illness itself, isolation.
Okay, so we've got this powerful idea. Recovery happens through sharing, peer-to-peer. But how do you take something that spontaneous and, well, make it sustainable? How does it become a reliable part of the process?
Yeah, how do you formalize something so personal? Well, interestingly, the formalization and even the term sponsor didn't start in a, spiritual setting. It started somewhere very practical,
Right.
the hospital. The term sponsor originally had this very literal, almost legal or liability-based meaning.
Really? How so?
Well, back in the late 1930s, think about it, most hospitals did not want to deal with chronic alcoholics. They were seen as difficult, unreliable, maybe even dangerous patients.
Right, a huge liability.
Exactly. But a few hospitals, some forward-thinking ones in Akron and New York, they agreed to take these folks in, but there was a catch, a big one.
Which was?
They would only admit an alcoholic if a sober member of this fledgling AA group would formally agree to sponsor them, like take responsibility.
So it was like vouching for them, a guarantee almost.
Pretty much a professional guarantee in a way. And the sponsor's job back then was incredibly hands-on, way more than just offering a listening ear.
What would they have to do?
Oh, it was intense. The sponsor literally took the person to the hospital. They had to visit regularly while they were detoxing or drying out. They had to be there when the person was discharged. They took them home, sometimes helped find them a place to stay.
Wow.
And crucially, they immediately plugged them into the network, introduced them to other sober alcoholics, took them to a meeting. The sponsor was basically on call, ready to listen, answer questions, manage crises. It was like continuous, unpaid support work through those really shaky first days and weeks.
That level of personal responsibility is huge. And it leads directly into maybe the most critical decision AA ever made about its structure, right?
Absolutely. The decision to absolutely reject professionalization.
They decided that keeping that peer-to-peer message pure was more important than anything else, even stability or money.
And that wasn't just an abstract idea. They faced that choice very early on. There was this guy, Frank Amos, a non-alcoholic friend of Bill's. He went to Akron in 1938 to check out what was happening.
He was impressed.
Blown away. He wrote this glowing report saying, basically, this thing works. And he suggested, if they just got some serious funding, maybe $30,000, which was a ton of money back then.
Huge sum.
They could set up a proper central office, hire staff, really scale this thing up fast, make it a formal, professional organization.
Sounds like a logical next step for any growing movement. So what happened?
Well, the report got the attention of John D. Rockefeller Jr., one of the biggest philanthropists on the planet.
Right. You'd think he'd jump at funding something like this.
He was interested, definitely warm towards it, but his reaction is legendary. He actually expressed deep anxiety about the idea of professionalizing AA.
Anxiety. Why?
He worried that if it became about big money, about paid staff, it would inevitably dilute the core spiritual message. It would kill the magic, basically. That peer relationship, the non-professional aspect, he saw that as essential.
So he didn't give them the big bucks?
Nope. He gave a much smaller gift, just enough really to get the big book printed and keep the tiny New York office running for a bit. The specific intention was to leave AA, as he put it, very much on its own.
Wow. His hesitation actually forced them to stay non-professional. He strategically kept them hungry.
You could say that. His anxiety basically ensured they couldn't turn into salaried missionaries or therapists or paid social workers. They had to rely on the unpaid volunteer effort of one alcoholic helping another.
It's countercultural, especially today, with the focus on scaling and funding everything. To deliberately turn down that kind of money.
It shows how deeply the founders understood the danger. The danger of power shifting from the spiritual principles to, money and status.
And they lived that principle themselves, didn't they?
Yeah.
The founders were careful not to be seen as professionals benefiting financially.
Meticulously careful. Bill Wilson especially, he talked a lot about those implacable urges, his words for personal power and prestige, public honors and money. He knew those things could destroy the fellowship.
And they really did make sacrifices.
Yeah.
Bill and Dr. Bob and their wives Lois and Ann.
Oh, absolutely. They got very little financially directly from AA. Yes, there were some royalties from the big book eventually, but that was carefully managed by the fellowship's board, not them personally. And there was a point where the fellowship helped Bill with his mortgage payments, but even that was done very cautiously.
Why so cautious?
They had to maintain that spiritual line. If they started drawing salaries, acting like executives, they wouldn't be seen as fellow sufferers anymore. They'd be professionals. Or worse, maybe people would think they were just cashing in on their own recovery stories.
Right. It would kill the peer dynamic.
Exactly. This choice guaranteed that the wisdom, the experience wasn't locked up with paid experts. It had to be passed on peer to peer. The sponsor is a guide, a fellow traveler, not a therapist. And that reinforces the very connection that fights the isolation of the illness.
Okay, so this one-on-one sponsor relationship starts out as this practical necessity almost in hospitals, but then it becomes embedded right into the core spiritual program, the 12 steps.
Absolutely. It moves from practical support to being a crucial part of the spiritual path itself. And the step that really cements this, the anchor for that necessary vulnerability and intimacy, is step 5.
Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
Right. Think about that last part. And to another human being. In a time when therapy wasn't common, and confession was often tied to religious judgment, saying your deepest flaws out loud to another person, that was pretty radical.
And that other human being is almost always a sponsor, right?
Overwhelmingly, yes. That's the person you build that trust with.
So why is that step so vital? Why can't someone just, admit their stuff privately to themselves and God? Why involve another person?
The source material is really emphatic about this. Speaking the truth out loud to another person does something profound. It deflates the ego. It breaks that crushing sense of isolation.
How so?
Because the alcoholic often carries this deep-seated belief that they are uniquely awful, that their secrets, their failures, are just too terrible to share. The sources say that without facing that fear, without a fearless admission of defects, very few people could actually stay sober. The weight of all that hidden shame and isolation would just pull them back down eventually.
Makes sense. So the sponsor's role here is critical. What are they supposed to do? Just listen.
Listening is huge, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's more than that. They embody AA's experience with this step. They're not there to judge, definitely not to give professional therapy or analysis. Their job is to be a companion and a mirror. Yeah. And crucially, they help the newcomer find what the texts call a balanced perspective, which means helping them take responsibility for their actions, but without taking on crippling blame or shame.
Okay, responsibility without blame. How does a sponsor help with that?
Primarily by demonstrating it. They prove the newcomer isn't unique in their failings. How? By talking openly, easily about their own defects, their own struggles, both past and present.
Sharing their own inventory, basically.
Exactly. And this is a really important distinction the sources make. They do it without exhibitionism.
Ah, okay. So it's not about glorifying the past bad behavior.
Not at all. It's about using your own honest experience as a tool to show the other person, look, I've been there too. We all have the stuff. You're not alone, and there's a way through it. It's objective honesty aimed at providing reassurance.
And this process, it helps shift the focus, doesn't it? Away from just wallowing in guilt.
Totally. The whole point is to move towards truth, towards learning, towards growth. Instead of just making a list of wrongs and feeling terrible, the sponsor might help the sponsee look at it differently. Maybe ask questions like, okay, where is my life out of balance here? Where am I not living up to who I could be? Where have I been dishonest with myself or others?
So it becomes less about moral judgment and more about objective self-assessment, getting honest.
Precisely. It's a subtle but powerful shift. And that honest sharing happening within the safe container of that sponsor-sponsee relationship, that's what starts to free the person from that prison of ego and shame. They feel seen, truly seen, maybe for the first time, without judgment. And they start to see themselves more clearly, too.
Which prepares them for the next steps and for carrying the message themselves.
Exactly. That whole process, the sponsor sharing, the sponsee confessing, that mutual vulnerability, it leads us right back to the core survival mechanism we talked about, which is built into step 12.
Giving it away to keep it.
That's the one, the core message, repeated over and over. You cannot keep your sobriety unless you actively give it away.
So step 12, carrying this message to other alcoholics, isn't just a nice thing to do if you feel like it.
It's mandatory. It's essential for the individual's own continued recovery, their spiritual life, even their physical life. And at the same time, it's the engine that keeps the entire fellowship alive and functioning.
The sources call it the extra dividend.
Yeah, I love that phrase. Doing service, working with a newcomer, it's not just altruism. It pays you back. It keeps you grounded. It reminds you where you came from, keeps your own problems in perspective, reinforces humility.
As the book says, frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives.
Exactly. And that constant, informal, person-to-person passing on of the message, one alcoholic taking responsibility for sharing their story with the next suffering person, that is the ultimate survival mechanism. It works completely outside any central control. It ensures that the real knowledge, the lived experience keeps flowing through vulnerability, not through some top-down decree that could get distorted or corrupted.
Okay, so that one-on-one connection, the sponsorship, is clearly the lifeblood. But you've got this global network. How do you keep that fragile connection safe? How do you stop the whole thing from dissolving into chaos or getting corrupted on a larger scale?
That's where the 12 traditions come in. They're like the guardrails for the whole fellowship. They evolved out of hard-won experience, specifically designed to protect that core message and the fellowship itself from all the usual pitfalls: ego, money, power, fame.
And the bedrock tradition, the one that underpins all the others, is the 12th tradition, right?
Right. It's explicitly called the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, and its core principle is anonymity.
But anonymity here isn't just about keeping secrets or privacy, is it? It's more fundamental than that.
Much more. It's an active principle for the organization's health. It's a direct shield against those implacable urges, as Bill W. called them, for personal power and prestige.
The founders saw that those urges, wanting to be famous, wanting recognition, wanting influence, had actually tricked people up, made them drink again.
Yes. They saw how resentment and ego battles flared up when personalities got put before principles. So the tradition says, if members start using AA for personal gain, chasing public honors, trying to become celebrities, leveraging their membership for money or status, it poses a huge risk.
How big a risk?
The sources are stark. Breaking anonymity at the public level for selfish reasons could drag the entire fellowship down into what they call a ruinous dead end.
Wow.
Yeah. They say personal anonymity at the public level is just as vital to the life of AA as 100% sobriety is to the life of each and every member. It's that serious. It's the practical voice of experience saying, principles first, always.
Okay, so anonymity protects against individual ego. How does the structure protect against centralized power, against someone trying to take charge?
That's hardwired in too, mainly through tradition too. This one says the ultimate authority isn't a person or a board or a president. It's a loving God, as expressed through the group conscience.
The group conscience, meaning the collective sense of the members in a meeting.
Essentially, yes. And crucially, this means leaders aren't bosses. The tradition is explicit. Leaders are trusted servants. They do not govern.
Trusted servants, they do not govern. That's a huge difference from most organizations. Servant, not senator.
Exactly. That phrase captures it perfectly. A senator makes policy, tells people what to do. A trusted servant, well, they do the chores.
Chores, like what? Explain how that rotating committee structure actually works day to day.
Well, in a typical group, you'll have positions like secretary, treasurer, literature person, coffee maker. People elected for a set term, often just 6 months or a year. Their job is to handle the practical stuff. Pay the rent for the room, make sure there are books and pamphlets, set up the chairs, make the coffee. Essential tasks.
But they don't have authority over the members.
Absolutely none. They operate based on what the group, through its conscience, wants. They are strictly forbidden from giving spiritual advice in an official capacity, judging anyone's behavior, or issuing any kind of orders.
So what happens if someone in one of those roles gets a bit power hungry, starts acting like a boss trying to govern?
The system corrects itself pretty quickly. The sources say they get summarily eliminated at the next election.
Summarily eliminated, no messing around.
Nope. The group conscience tends to have a pretty low tolerance for ego trips in leadership roles. This keeps the power radically decentralized right there with the members in the room. It ensures the authority stays with the shared experience, not with some elite few. And that keeps the message pure, free from personal power games.
Okay, so anonymity guards the individual ego. Group conscience guards against internal power grabs. What about external distractions? How do the traditions keep the focus clear?
2 key traditions there. First, Tradition 5. AA has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers.
One purpose only.
That's it. The founders learned the hard way, apparently, that trying to do too many things leads to doing none of them well. AA has to do one thing well, then many badly, because its survival depends on that laser focus. They can't be a hospital or a therapy center or a social club or a political action group. Just carry the message.
Which leads to Tradition 10, right? Staying out of outside issues.
Exactly. AA takes no opinion on outside issues, politics, religious debates, social controversies, legal reforms. Doesn't matter how important or worthy they seem, AA stays out of it.
Is that seen as like a moral stance? Apathy?
Not at all. The sources frame it as purely pragmatic. It's not about being virtuous, it's about survival. They looked at history and saw too many movements get destroyed by getting dragged into public fights, getting mired in politics, trying to be all things to all people.
So staying neutral keeps them from getting fractured or distracted.
Precisely. It ensures the fellowship can exist anywhere, under any political system, without getting caught up in local controversies. It keeps the door open to any alcoholic, regardless of their other beliefs or affiliations. It protects that core mission. Just carry the message one-on-one through sponsorship.
So all these traditions rejecting money, fame, power, outside distractions, they all circle back to protecting that central act of one alcoholic sharing their experience, strength, and hope with another.
That's the heart of it, protecting the transmission line. Just like Bill W. and Dr. Bob did right at the start, #tag conclusion.
Okay, so pulling all this together, what we're seeing from the sources is that AA's survival, its ability to keep this message intact for decades across the globe, isn't some happy accident.
Not at all. It's the result of deliberate, conscious choices. The whole structure is built to prioritize what the texts call 2 magnificent standards: humility and personal responsibility.
Humility in rejecting power, fame, money, professionalism.
Right. The organization actively pushes back against all those ego-driven things that usually define success in the outside world.
And responsibility, not just for your own sobriety, but for carrying the message.
Exactly. The message survives because its transmission method is built in. It has to be passed on one-to-one through that sponsorship relationship, through 12th step work. It's peer experience meeting raw vulnerability.
It's not coming down from some central headquarters or being controlled by paid staff or clergy.
Nope. the power is dispersed. Structurally, the group has that liberty verging on license,
Yeah.
but for the individual member, the path is actually pretty clear-cut. You have to engage with the principles of recovery, especially helping others.
Or else.
Or else, the sources say, the penalty is sure and swift. Relapse is often the consequence. So your own survival is directly linked to your willingness to participate in that transmission system.
That reliance on the personal connection, the sponsor-sponsee relationship, that's the hidden engine driving the whole thing.
It really is. It ensures the core principles aren't just theories in a book. They're constantly being lived, tested, and passed on in their most vital form through shared human experience.
It's quite incredible, really, this huge, global, apparently anarchic society.
Yeah.
Its success, its very survival, hinges entirely on that simple, quiet act.
Yeah. The willingness of one person, maybe newly sober themselves, to get honest and share their deepest truths. And the willingness of another person, their sponsor, to just listen without judgment and share their own story, flaws and all.
That constant exchange, honesty meeting acceptance, that's the lifeblood. That's what makes it resilient.
It seems to be. So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to mull over is this.
Yeah.
In our modern world, which is so obsessed with metrics, scalability, centralization, professional credentials, can you think of any other truly global institution that safeguards its core integrity and ensures its own survival based almost entirely on the unpaid, intimate, voluntary act of one person simply helping another? It's quite something to consider.